I cannot do spicy food anymore. And by spicy, I mean hot, peppery, not temperature wise. And as a Jamaican, that kind of makes me sad. But it makes me excited at the same time. Here's why. It makes me sad because inherently, my Jamaican food tends to be a little on the spicy side. And this I was reminded of when I made a recent trip home, and everything I ate tasted spicier than I'm accustomed to, because I don't cook with that much heat in it. And most Jamaicans would probably say, Shanique, there's barely any spice in there, meaning heat. And for me though, it was evident because I don't cook with the same level of spice anymore. I used to, but not anymore. And it's something I've noticed over the last couple of years. I don't know if it's because of perimenopause. I don't know if it's a natural thing with aging, but my taste buds have shifted in such a way that anything that's super peppery, it can be peppery and hot at the same time. So it can be hot, I can have a steaming plate of food and it also be peppery. I will have no fun in that. Experience isn't fun for me because I like to taste the flavors in food. So what does this mean? So it's sad because I can't eat as spicy as I used to, or I was reminded that I can't handle spicier food than what I've been doing. And two, it makes me a little hopeful because now I have to get curious. And as a result of that, I'm sharing with you 3 things that this recognition or acknowledgement is bringing up as a way of becoming more comfortable in the kitchen, but with food and exploring food. And maybe you might find this helpful, or maybe this is something that you need to hear on how to approach it yourself, whether you're a woman in perimenopause or you're just somebody who can just no longer handle spicy food. Number 1, it means that the food, flavor-wise, has to stand on its own. Take the spice out of it. So the food has to be well seasoned, well flavored. And I find one of the things I find, whenever eating out is, especially when the food is peppery, that if you take the spice away from these foods, what is underneath it? And oftentimes there isn't a lot of seasoning or saturated seasoning, if that's a thing. You can tell when something is well seasoned versus when something has just been slapped with pepper or sauce or hot sauce or whatever that spice is called. So it means as a home cook, have to rely on the flavors, or the flavors have to stand up by themselves. So if we take that spice, that heat out of it, how does that meal stand out? No, this is not to say that you're not to have a spicy meal, by all means, but I'm saying if there are other seasonings in that meal, you want to balance those spices or seasoning with the heat. Granted, heat, whether you use a little bit or a lot, sometimes depending on the type of heat you're adding, can just overpower all of that. So the question I want to ask is, how does that food stand up without that pepper? If you take the pepper out of it, say let's use jerk seasoning. Now, jerk seasoning is that typical spicy seasoning. Whether you use the dry rub or the marinade, it tends to be a little spice. If you take that heat out of the jerk seasoning, it should still be very flavorful. And while the Scotch bonnet does add that heat, I personally think you can have so little of it in there without it impacting the flavor of the marinade or the rub itself, because that marinade or rub is well flavored. But also once you use it on whatever food you're using, let's say meat, it's marinated overnight or for a couple of hours or at least an hour, so it can penetrate the food or the meat. So the question now is, can the base of the dish, especially if you're a home cook, can the base of the dish stand on its own without this heat? And if it can, then you've got a good recipe or a good dish. If it can't, then what are you going to do? Where can you bring up the flavor of the dish without the spice, or with less spice? Because some people I can tolerate a little spice, just not the typical. So can the rest of the flavors be brought up as you bring the spice level down? So that's the first question. The second thing to think about is, now that you can't handle spicy food, or you realize you can't handle it or handle a lot of it, what then can you handle? So this requires you experimenting. So like I said, try it with no spice, try it with a little spice, try it with some. You will find your threshold, and it means being open. So don't be rigid, or trying not to be rigid with a particular thing. Again, I'll go back to jerk. Yes, spice or heat or pepper is important, but don't be so married or rigid with thinking that it has to be, and otherwise it's not Jamaican, that you don't make it, or you have a bad experience with it because it's so peppery you can't eat it. What's the point? And I am going to stand on this and say, just because I take the pepper out of it does not mean I'm not honoring the Jamaican jerk seasoning. Only can go somewhere else with that. Judge me if you want, but it's still very much a Jamaican dish, jerk chicken or whatever else I might jerk. And to be clear, yes, I know jerk is the method. So let's say jerk inspired or jerk style. Jerk seasoned, let's call it that, because we're referring to the seasoning and not the method itself. So let me just state that. So experimenting is important. And what does this experimentation look like? I've said it. Less spice, more of the other flavors. If there are no other spices or flavors other than salt and pepper, I don't know what to tell you. Anyways, experiment. This is the time to experiment. This is the time to explore whether, what seasonings, what spices can be included in that dish. Instead of something being peppery, maybe it's something a little bit more sweet. Maybe it's a little more savory, hint of more savory in there, less spicy, but more, maybe it's umami. So that's like, or maybe it's a little more salty. And salty doesn't mean extra salty so you can't eat it, because that's the other thing. So one thing if it's spicy, it's another thing when it's salty. When it's salty, you can't enjoy the food either. But maybe it needs a little more salt. Maybe it needs something to brighten it. So something like some lemon juice or lime juice. Maybe it needs a little sweetness to it. How can you then compensate for the spice being reduced or removed to make the food enjoyable? So that's the second thing. And the third thing, which I think is connected to the second, which is, experiment, is what has your experience with other cuisines given you leverage for? Meaning, if you've been exposed, or if you've exposed yourself to other types of cuisines, other types of foods, other cultures and their food, that now gives you leverage for options or possibilities. It means you can now tap into those cultures' foods, or those foods maybe as a substitute. So maybe instead of jerk chicken, maybe you try something on a Korean spice instead. What can that give you? So for example, I know Habanero pepper, which is a common pepper you find here in the US, is not so common as Scotch bonnet, but it's comparable to Scotch bonnet. When people are making substitutes and they can't find Scotch bonnet, they will often suggest Habanero. To me, Scotch bonnet is a little more fruity, but spicier to me than Habanero. Habanero, I don't get nearly as much heat out of it than a Scotch bonnet. So I will use a Habanero in place of a Scotch bonnet. Chili peppers are way spicier to me than, say, a jalapeno pepper. I can eat jalapeno peppers. I can't do that with chili pepper. So, and this is because I've exposed myself to the other cuisines that may use these things, like jalapeno, common for me in Mexican food, chili pepper, common for me when I go to use Thai or explore Korean, Asian food. I find chili pepper to be a common spice that's used in the foods that I've explored. So that gives me leverage to maybe try those instead. Is it going to change the flavor profile of a jerk chicken if I use habanero? No. Chili pepper? Probably. Cayenne pepper? which is another common spice that's used in a dry rub as a substitute when making, say, jerk seasoning or jerk spice rub, it's not going to give the same heat to me as if I were to use dried Scotch bonnet pepper or powdered Scotch bonnet pepper, which I don't really have unless I make it. But my point is, exploring other cuisines gives you options. So maybe that is something for you to consider. Have you expanded your palate enough? I love me some Korean food. Love Korean food. I'm not sure what it is. Well, it's probably connected to me loving K-dramas. I love Chinese food, but I prefer Chinese food in Jamaica. That's just my preference. I, however, will cook Chinese food at home. And part of it for me is, a lot of it is umami. So a lot of that salty, there's a lot of salt type sauces that are used. So like oyster sauce, hoisin sauce, soy sauce. There's a lot of salt in these sauces. It doesn't have to be a salty dish. I'm just saying what they call umami, that salty ocean type essence you get in a dish for Chinese, for me, with a lot of Chinese food. With Korean, it's that gochujang, that red pepper, at least for me. I know I'm not trying to say I'm an expert at it, but from what I've observed in Thai, it's chili. It's chili pepper, chili paste. And I've learned to make some of these meals with less of the pepper, less of the heat. And so I'm able to utilize the other spices and seasonings that are common in these dishes to make the meal stand out. And that's my suggestion to anyone who might find themselves struggling with this. So whether it's peppery or spicy food, or maybe you can't do salty foods, or maybe sugary foods, I hope this gives you something to think about as a home, especially if you're the home cook. Can the meal stand on its own without that or without as much, if any at all? Can you experiment so that you can find ways to maybe marry flavors that will give you a similar profile? Or can you draw on the cuisines of other cultures so that you can continue to enjoy food even though you might be having less spice, or maybe you can't handle as much heat as you could? Those are things I want you to think about. Those are things that I'm thinking about as I go step into my kitchen now that I know I can't handle a super spicy food. So one dish that I am going to experiment with is pad see ew. Is that what it's called? No, not pad see ew. Drunken noodles. That's what they call it. And part of it is not having it spicy. I tried to have it spicy, or I had it spicy, and I could not feel my mouth. I could not eat it. I couldn't enjoy it because it was so spicy even while hot. And then having it afterwards, it still was too spicy for me to enjoy the meal. So that's my mission, to recreate that dish at home with little less of that chili spice or that chili pepper in there, or chili paste, whatever it is that is used in there, that I will be using less of it to see what my tolerance is, but also how the food compares with less of that heat. So that's my suggestion to you. I hope you found this useful. If you did and you want more of this, be sure to join the email list, the weekly dose. You'll find it in the description below, and I will see you back here for the next one.